Are you a firefighter striving for peak performance while battling burnout and stress? Are you seeking practical strategies to manage the demanding challenges of your profession and balance that with a healthy personal lifestyle? Welcome to Priority Traffic Podcast, where we dive into topics that support our growth as humans, improve our wellness and performance as firefighters. We look at wellness and performance through the lens of personal growth, community support, and individual resilience. Whether you're seeking strategies to prevent burnout, tips on building resilience, or methods to enhance recovery and self-care, this podcast is here to provide you with the tools you need to navigate the unique challenges of the firefighter profession. We would love to hear from you on our various social media platforms. Take a moment to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn so that you can stay up to date on our latest episodes, tools, and strategies. If you come across any content that resonates with you, smash the like button and share it with your crew, family, and friends. Your support and feedback matters and helps us reach a wider audience. In addition, we highly encourage you to subscribe to our channels and leave a rating or review. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also boosts our visibility to like-minded individuals. It's time to prioritize your wellness so you can realize the performance you crave and the performance your community deserves. Enjoy the show. Welcome back, everybody, to Priority Traffic Podcast, where we try to offer tips and tricks for the firefighter to become the best version of themselves they can be. I'm your host, Chris, and today I have with me Megan Lautz, a registered dietitian and trainer of firefighters and police officers. Good afternoon, Megan.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. How are you doing today?
I can't complain. It's a little rainy here in Baltimore, but, we'll get through it.
Absolutely. So I wanted to have you on to utilize you as a subject matter expert to help shed some light onto the fueling challenges of firefighters and try and give some tips and tricks to all the firefighters out there who might be either struggling with diet, exercise, and fueling, what they're eating day to day, and maybe those guys who are trying to step into the next level where they're on that verge of changing their life and they need to update or, level up in some area. And nutrition is, for me, and for wellness, is at the core, or at the fundamental level of all that high performance stuff. So let's dig right in.
Yeah, let's go into it.
So if you don't mind giving the audience a brief introduction of yourself, how you kind of got into this space as a civilian and your background.
Yeah, so I am a registered dietitian and strength coach. I have been working with relatively large departments of roughly 1,400 to 1,500 firefighters for the past almost 7 years. Initially, I just got lucky. I got a position as a wellness program manager at an OC Health clinic in Montgomery County, Maryland. And I had fire, I had police, I had corrections, bus operators, warehouse. I had all of public safety, but fire was the most open. They let me take CPAT. I was able to pass CPAT. They involved me in the academy. I did some 24-hour ride-alongs. So I really just because I was a civilian and I have no family in fire and rescue, I just was like, okay, well, I know nutrition, but I don't know your job, right? Sure. So you guys are the expert in your job. So until I understand the job, I think it's a disservice to just, spout my plate and USDA guidelines when you guys sometimes don't even eat off of plates. Right. So,
sometimes styrofoam.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes Whole Foods doesn't really work when, you're picking up extra overtime, you've got little kids at home and meal prep, when you get tired, it falls to the wayside. So, what I have done over the past 7 years is really trying to focus on the career and then also the evidence, not only in the general population, but the evidence that we have for firefighters, for nutrition, specifically, and then I also include sleep because somebody's got to talk about it, and then fitness as well.
Absolutely. Sleep is one of those things that really, I don't know how it got pigeonholed as to being something we can do without, but holy smokes, we need to fix that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of one of those things where if you're at one of those busier stations and when you're working shift work in general, it's just really hard. It's and the problem is you guys are getting general population information, or you go to a doctor and they're not really paying attention to you. And they're just like, you need to sleep. And it's you don't understand. If the lady in the ceiling starts yelling, I got to go. Yeah. So, and I think more recently we are starting to see strategies, specifically in the military, where it's a little more tailored to people who don't get that sleep. But the other side is if it's been 10, 15 years into your career and you're not sleeping very great, less than 6 hours a night, and you're having trouble in other areas of wellness, I've got to address sleep first because your appetite is going to be pretty dysregulated.
Oh, interesting. So before we get too far, you made a couple points there that I want to touch on. You've taken the CPAT.
Yes. It took me 3 times to pass. I just I could get through the test. I just wasn't very fast, like 11 something minutes. And then eventually I got it just under 10.
Nice. How long did you train for that specifically?
I didn't. Experience? So, I actually was proud. So I used to do bodybuilding. I don't do it anymore because mentally I spiraled out of control. But at that time I was lifting probably 5 or 6 times a week just because I liked it. I was a personal trainer in college. My cardio was probably more of my challenge than it was. So I think for women, if you come in strong to CPAT, you just have better outcomes because usually endurance wise, we do okay. It's the strength is usually the deficit for females. So I felt like I was dying the whole time, but I did pass it. So there's that.
Nice. What else have you done to kind of put yourself into the proverbial firefighter's boots?
Yeah. So I did a 24-hour shift at one of the busier stations, I believe, in the country, actually. So Gaithersburg, Maryland is just outside of, not really just outside, sort of outside of DC. Yeah. Pretty busy station. I was on the ambulance for most of the day. And then at night, I think I was on the tower. And I don't know how many calls we ran. We had a lot of calls. Yeah. Missed a lot of meals, missed dinner, that kind of stuff. And then the academy, I've really kind of paid attention, and I actually now have a product where my nutrition for the academy is very much tailored to it. What do you eat to prepare? Nutrition 101, nutrition from EMS to fire, which typically if it's an EMS fire academy, there's a transition point, and then how to transition into the field. So really a lot of station visits, a lot of ride-alongs. I try to be in the station at least 3 to 5 times a month at Fairfax, but it's just kind of hard with one dietitian, but just as much as hands-on stuff as I can, except I don't do blood and guts very good. So that kind of knocks me out of it. And they gave me gear at Fairfax. So now I can go on burning buildings sometimes.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. So I've done evolutions before. And of course it was the first time I've ever been on air and they just throw me into an evolution. And I'm like, guys, I don't know what any of this means. And you just gave me an axe and I hit the captain in the leg. It's all fun.
Oh gosh. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think I've had a conversation with my crew that we're basically astronauts on Earth when we're in that gear.
Yeah.
And what was your take on being in all that equipment?
It wasn't as bad as I thought, especially relative to CPAT, a 50-pound vest, and the vests that we had in Montgomery were all the same size. So for someone, 100 to 200 pounds heavier than me. So when in CPAT, it would move, you know what I mean? And I'm like, oh God. So the gear, it's more fitted a little bit. I mean, the boots are a little wonky, but I was comparing it to, have you ever had the full face snorkel mask?
Yeah. Yep.
When it sucks in on your face and it's hard to breathe. So I thought that's what it was going to be like, but it's just a very free flowing, obviously you guys know. It wasn't as bad as I thought. It was just I've never crawled. I've never searched. So when you just, they're all right, you're going in. And the instructors didn't know I was the dietitian. They just thought I was a firefighter. I was like, oh, no. Guys, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what you're saying to me.
It could be a lot.
And unfortunately I was with a captain who was from the academy and very patient and was okay, you're fine. The person I was partnered with, but, it's kind of one of those things where you just kind of have to throw me in the fire and I'm just okay, I'm here.
Awesome. So you also brought up that you're a dietitian, right?
Yeah, that's my big thing.
How do we, as firemen, we hear dietitian, nutritionists,
nutritionalist.
Can you kind of just, can you kind
all the words
muddy the water a little less for us on that?
Sure. So there's a couple of different ways you can get into nutrition. Dietetics is not an easy path. I think a lot of people, when they think of nutrition, they're thinking of someone who's just getting like a certification on the internet. But what dietitians can do versus the general nutritionist, and there's also a higher level of nutritionist. But in any case, dietitians, we go to 4 years undergrad, bachelor's degree, and usually in dietetics. And then we do a year unpaid internship where we pay 10 grand to work 40 hours a week. And then you have to pass a credentialing exam, which I think right now is like a 50% pass rate. Like it's pretty low. And that's after you did all that. So, and actually now as of 2024, all new dietitians will be required to have a master's. So you will have to do bachelor's, master's, a internship, then you can sit for your boards. And then you usually have to get licensed in certain states. It depends. It's 7 or 8 years of school. And the reason that we have that much schooling is we're doing food service, clinical, and community, and we are able to provide what's called medical nutrition therapy. So if you have high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, IBS, PCOS, any sort of medical condition that may have a dietary component to it that needs a shift, that's what dietitians can do. A general nutritionist that doesn't have licensing or some other things, they cannot talk about medical side. They often can't prescribe meal plans depending on state regulations. Some places get away with it other than others. Supplement protocols, those kinds of things. You usually want to get it from a dietitian. And the biggest reason you want to go to a dietitian for those kinds of things is we have your medical background and the medications that you're taking in mind. And I have seen people prescribe protein powder to people with end-stage renal disease and end-stage liver disease, which could hurt them significantly.
Sure.
And it just seems like everybody takes this. It's healthy for most people, but in certain conditions, it can be very detrimental.
Absolutely. And then the last thing, well, not the last thing, but the next thing, you mentioned that firefighters are often being prescribed, and we can get into this further, but information for the 9-to-5ers. And as firemen, we understand that we are on shift, but can you kind of dig into that and just give a brief overview of how we're not necessarily living in a lifestyle that 9-to-5 information actually will help us?
Well, if you're working on a day work or admin position, it probably is a little bit more applicable. But when you're talking about shift work or even academy standpoints, you have two options as a firefighter. You have the general 9-to-5 stuff that's on the internet, that typically tells you to stop eating after 8 p.m. Carbs are the devil. You should never have carbs. Like all of, no sugar in your oral rehydration solution stuff for people who sit at a desk most of the day, right? That's what it's geared towards. And then go home and have dinner with their family and go to bed at night. And the other option is you listen to some other, firefighters who are still spouting the same general information or just saying, hey, nutrition's important, and then ending there. Like how many presentations have you probably been to that are like, maybe it was a fitness presentation or a wellness presentation. They're like, nutrition is important. Eat like off of a plate. And you're like, this doesn't really help me.
Sure. So
those are kind of the options that firefighters are given. And unfortunately, with sleep deprivation, exposure to trauma is, I think, the biggest, probably the most overlooked piece, in my opinion. Trauma changes your brain, and those brain changes lead to different food choices. Sure. And I think all of us know that. You run a bad call, like, do you want a salad after? I mean, there's always one person, but so trauma, just overall higher general stress, and then the inconsistency of the job, or predictably unpredictable of the job. So you could either be running a high intensity call, a fire related call, or you could just be running EMS all day. And that becomes really challenging because I think firefighters want a black and white answer, and it's not a black and white answer. So what I have to teach is how do we adjust on days where we're kind of more sitting around versus days where it's a little bit higher intensity.
Yeah, exactly. So like I was saying previously, we kind of are starting to see that firefighting is being diagnosed as a possibly sedentary job, unless you're in a very, very busy service system where you're running 20, 25 calls a day, you're just on the go. But specifically in my department, there are days where we're not running more than 5 calls. Granted, there are days where we're running just shy of 20, but how do we as firefighters start to move into those days where, well, man, I was so hungry yesterday. We worked out real hard, but today kind of tired and there's not much going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of trickier for your situation because, so I didn't mention now, but I currently work for Fairfax Fire and Police, and that is on the left side of DC. We are pretty busy. I would say most of my clients, patients, whatever you want to call them, are probably running at least 8 to 20 calls a day consistently. And Fairfax is notorious for like training all the time. Like they just there's always a good amount of training built into their day, or community stuff, that kind of thing. So they're pretty busy. I'd say it's more challenging though, where, if you have one shift where you're sitting around and then another shift where you're getting your butt handed to you, you always have to plan like you're getting your butt handed to you. Because what happens is if I don't pack, like I need to eat 7 meals a day because of the call load and the activity load, then you don't have enough food on the day that you're surprised. So then you end up at fast food and you're cranky and you're tired. And we all make bad decisions when we're going through the Chick-fil-A drive-through, cranky and tired. And I can get into more specifics, but is that kind of what you were looking for?
Yeah, no, it seems like at my department specifically, we have a energy output where some days require us to expend more energy, where we'll train more, we'll take more calls, and other days we are not as pressed to expend and put out. So just trying to find a way to balance or solve that, because there's really no reason to eat 3 meals a day if you're not expending a ton of energy. Perhaps.
Well, I'd argue with that because
perfect.
Sorry.
No, that's great.
So here's the thing. I have worked with professionals who have said that firefighters only need to eat 1 meal a day. And my concern with that, or even like fasting is typically where people are going with that, is should I do intermittent fasting as a firefighter or a first responder? And my concern is if a box drops at 11 and you're fasting until noon, are you going to perform as optimally on that call as you would have if you had actually eaten something? Sure. And unfortunately, the evidence, at least in athletics, is showing that you probably will not.
Right.
I believe there is some research on firefighters and time-restricted eating, some smaller randomized controlled trials that it helped with calorie control. It's just the job, in my opinion, is so inconsistent that I would prefer, or I would recommend typically, that firefighters eat more regular meals for that reason, because they don't know what type of call they're going to get. The other reason for that is I've seen firefighters who've done intermittent fasting for a while. Maybe they're finally at the point where they're at a weight that they're comfortable at, or they've been just doing it for a while. And they come to me and they say, my energy sucks. My energy levels are horrible. I mean, we all know that leads to the energy drinks, and that's a whole nother tangent. But if I look at their diet and I say, hey, let's try moving breakfast up a little bit, or lunch up a little bit. Let's add some more snacks. Let's add some more meals. Get a carb at each meal. There's a significant improvement in energy, regardless of if they got more sleep or not.
Okay.
So most people, in my experience, tend to do better with more carbs spread throughout the day and more regular meals. And the challenge is unfortunately, I can't assume your portions as firefighters. A lot of people, I have a recipe book that's free on my website, and they're like, why aren't you controlling the portions? Well, I don't know what type of calls you're running that day. Right. And I also don't know if you want to use those leftovers for another shift. So I'd rather have leftovers, and I'd rather be able to make sure that you guys are fed enough. Because I think firefighters, sometimes the knee-jerk reaction is to cut as far as they can. And that leads to detriments in performance, not only physically, but also mentally, and energy deficits, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess where I was going with the not eating 3, like so some days we'll come in, about 7:30 or 8 o'clock. Somebody will throw together a breakfast, like an impromptu, hey, we had some meat left over from last day. There's breakfast at 8:30 or 9. Well, then we're going to eat lunch at 11:30 or noon, which ends up being a full-size lunch. And then shortly after that, we're going to eat lunch or dinner at 6. So it's like, that's a lot. And then if you do that on a day where you don't take a bunch of calls, I'm like, man, that's just a lot of calorie intake for not a lot of energy expenditure.
So the challenge then is it's on the firefighter to make sure they're being reasonable with their portions. So, and to me, reasonable is like, can you stick to one plate of food?
Sure.
Like if you can stick to one plate of food, that's usually better than what most firefighters are doing, which is going up for the seconds or finishing up the scraps. So, and that takes willpower. I'm not going to lie. It is going to take you being pretty disciplined with that, but also not forcing discipline when you are physically hungry. So a lot of times, some people will come to me and they actually want calories and macros, and it's not the right fit for every firefighter, but a lot of times it's a good starting point. And a lot of times I will have them increase their calories on shift by between 300 and 500 calories, or go to maintenance on shift because they report being hungrier. They're typically more ambiently active. Usually I've seen, especially if I hear a step count of 15 to 20,000 steps a day or more, they're going to need more. And that's just me making stuff up. It just gives me an idea. Like if you're 15 to 20,000 and you're just running EMS, that's still more than what most people are doing when they're just trying to recover from that shift the next day.
Absolutely. So that leads me to my next question. It sounds like it's on the firemen to be aware and have that self-awareness of if they're going to put out or if they're going to eat a lot of food and not exercise or get up all day. But it sounds like they need to be tracking a few things.
They can be, but also keeping in mind, and I know this personally because when I was bodybuilding, my fitness pal actually led me to an eating disorder for a short period of my life. It was just a lot of pressure, and I'm a perfectionist, and I was like the perfect candidate to end up spiraling with that. So I'm very aware of that because I've noticed this population's pretty similar. Some people can do okay with numbers and other people cannot. And I usually ask that question in sessions like, hey, have you ever tracked before? How do you feel about numbers? And some people are like, hey, this sounds like a good idea. Other people, not so much. But if you are paying attention to stuff and you like the numbers, usually I have people focus on calories, protein, and fiber.
Okay.
And notice how I didn't say carbs or fat.
Yeah, I did.
And the reason I say that is because whenever you start logging for the first time as a shift worker, you're like, this freaking sucks. The free version of my Fitness Pal sucks. I've heard you can put your location as UK, and that gives you all the free options. I haven't played with that yet. But it sucks. You have to remember to track what you ate. Sometimes it's not always a perfect science. So then you're upset that you didn't do it perfectly. So it's a whole thing. So it's hard enough to track in and of itself.
Yeah.
Then if I told you to track every single dang number in my Fitness Pal, you're going to lose your ever-loving mind and fall off. So from a consistency standpoint, calories are going to be important for whatever your goals are: weight loss, weight gain, muscle gain, whatever, maintenance. Protein is going to be for muscle mass and maintenance, usually recommending somewhere between 0.7 to 1 gram per pound, depending on what the person's goals are. It is a higher amount than the general population because you are active. And then the last thing is going to be fiber, because I would argue that most firefighters are likely deficient in fiber. Fiber's in fruits, veggies, whole grains. And what goes to the wayside when you're tired and cranky? Fruits, vegetables, whole grains.
Right.
So that's between 25 for women and 30 to 38 grams of fiber per day for men. Okay. And the reason I don't have people focus on carbs and fat at the beginning of the first few sessions is because evidence suggests that when carbs or calories and protein are kept the same, high carb diets versus high fat diets, people lose just as much weight on those. Oh. So it comes down to the personal preference. It comes down to consistency. And if someone just prefers being on a low carb diet, I'm going to keep them there unless their energy levels are telling me otherwise and their performance is telling me otherwise. But usually I lean towards more higher carb and then just let people focus on 3 things. And then we move on as they progress through coaching.
Absolutely. That's very interesting. So looking at that, it sounds like firefighters have quite a different demand structure for food than the general population. Is that pretty accurate?
I would say it's the application is different than the general population. So I would do that same thing for my general population. It's just I am making assumptions that there may need to be more prepackaged food, some fast food options available, and making sure that any recommendations that I have, keep in mind that you don't have time, money, and energy.
Sure. Yeah, those are three things that we all seem to struggle from. And you just mentioned fast food options. Like, so just so people don't get screwed up on that, can you kind of give us an idea of what that looks like? Because some days you don't have a choice. Like if you don't go to this fast food, you're not eating.
Correct. Yeah. And that's, again, one of my gripes with if you have someone who doesn't understand fire and they're like, you should never have fast food. I've even had firefighters say that. Why are you recommending fast food to our firefighters? Are you trying to kill them? And it's like, no. Right. How many rookies do you know who will cook medium rare chicken at their rookie dinner because this is the first time they've ever cooked in their life?
Yeah, sushi
right?
grade chicken, right?
Sushi grade, right? He's like, yeah, please, for the love of God. So there are actually quite a few firefighters who do not cook, either because they don't want to, they never learned how to, or they don't, they just don't want to do it. They never learned how to do it. So fast food, again, is a necessary evil. And I have coached firefighters who they've lost 20 pounds on fast food. So when I was brought into Fairfax, I was brought in just through my business, and we had some firefighters who had failed some fitness tests, and they needed to pass the tests in order to get back in the field. Mm-hmm. And one of them only ate fast food. They had a long commute. They were picked up a lot at the time. They couldn't pick up overtime, but they had other jobs, and that's what they ate every day. So we worked together on, here's what you need to order. And here's what you need for your car snack on the way home, and those kinds of things where they were healthier options. So usually if I don't have someone logging, I will say you need to get a protein and a plant at each meal. That is the rule. And that a protein, typically animal protein, dairy, chicken, fish are going to be ideal. Nuts and seeds, soy for vegetarians. And then the plant is going to be a fruit or a vegetable.
Okay.
And then people are like, well, what about the carbs and the fat? And it's like, y'all aren't going to forget about that. Okay. Like what is the first thing most of us put, like the first thing I put on my plate is going to be the carb, right? That's what I'm going to, my heart wants. It's not going to be missed. Let me tell you something.
Right.
But the gaps in first responder diets is fiber and protein. So protein in a plant. And that's the easiest way I can simplify it. So that means if you're going through the Chick-fil-A drive-thru, you're trying to get ideally a grilled either nugget or chicken sandwich. And if you're going to get the French fries, because I'm going to get the French fries at Chick-fil-A at least, then what can you add to that? So either a fruit cup or a salad. Whether you eat that fruit cup or salad with that meal immediately or you save it for later, at least you've added the plant piece. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
So I know that isn't perfect, but again, firefighters have a tendency of falling into that black or white mentality. Mm-hmm. Either I'm on the plan or I'm off the plan. And they just stay in that yo-yo for their entire career and slowly go 20, 50 pounds up in 20 to 30 years. Whereas if I give you more of a gray area, I can keep you more consistent, whether your life's on fire or if it's doing pretty decent at the moment.
Yeah, I like that. Protein in a plant. I think that makes sense, and that just opens up the options, like to go to fast food. Maybe we don't do it all the time because we tend to shop and eat in-house consistently. But now if we do go, now we have a plan moving into that restaurant X, Y, or Z. So that's actually pretty awesome.
It's the easiest way I can simplify it, honestly.
Yeah, and that's all firefighters need, I think, is a plan coming in, and whatever happens after that's, whatever, but at least we had targets moving forward. Without a target at a fast food restaurant, you're going to get whatever you want.
Unsupervised. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, don't let that happen.
No.
Yeah, we're just full-grown kids.
Yes.
So you mentioned Whole Foods. Can you just give a brief idea of what Whole Foods are?
So typically Whole Foods are like, people assume fresh, right?
Right.
That's the assumption is you should eat fresh if it shouldn't be minimally processed, or keep it as, non-processed as possible. But the problem that I see a lot of first responders have is they buy the fruits and the vegetables fresh, and then they go on shift. They get tired from shift depending on which one they have, or they pick up overtime. They get held over. And then next thing you know, those fruits and vegetables that they had in their fridge, they go bad. And then they're frustrated and they're back at the fast food place. So the thing that I want first responders to understand is that frozen and canned count. And sometimes a little bit of processing isn't the end of the world. So just because it's packaged doesn't mean it's bad for you. It's just picking better options. So frozen and canned, especially for the fruit or vegetable thing. So I said protein in a plant. Frozen or canned fruits and vegetables count. Frozen, sometimes it is picked at peak freshness. Fresh, it could get picked, sit on the back of a truck in the heat, sit in the back of the grocery store, sit in the front of the grocery store, you buy it, it goes bad in your fridge in 5 days. Right?
Yeah.
Compared to frozen, if I have frozen fruit, I can keep that in my freezer for forever.
Yeah.
And if you do almond milk, so almond milk is actually not originally refrigerated. They actually added it next to the milk because no one was going to the cranberry juice aisle to buy almond milk. So they put it, it's like a marketing tactic to put it next to the milk. But you can buy almond milk, and once you open it, it does have to be refrigerated. But if you kept almond milk at your station, as long as you're not allergic, whatever one you like, frozen berries and protein powder, you have a really quick smoothie that you can throw together after a workout or after a fire to get fluid, protein, and carbs to recover from that activity. And it's going to last 6 months,
Yeah.
So other
You can
things.
dip into that a couple times.
Well, exactly. And other things that you can think of too, I have a handout on my website, Go Bag Grabs. And that is like things like applesauce pouches. I'm a big fan of baby food for firefighters.
Yes, I love
not
those
because
things.
you act like children, but it's a full serving of fruit.
Right.
A full serving of fruit that's going to last 6 months or more in a pouch form. And you're going to think this is crazy, but I've gotten some of my firefighters off of pre-workout supplement caffeines by getting them to do 2 applesauce pouches before their workout.
Okay, so pre-workout, right?
Yeah, like the caffeinated one. Yeah.
Yeah. What's your take on that? Because I haven't used pre-workout in about 10 years, maybe longer.
Yeah.
And I swore it off after, I just didn't like to tingle like that all the time. It was awful.
You're not a big fan of beta-alanine. You just need one that doesn't have beta-alanine.
So what's your take on pre-workout? Because I know a lot of guys that I work with use them, and I try to eat. And what's a meal option that can fuel that workout? Because we work out pretty hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to. It's like part of the job. Or it should be. But yeah. So here's the thing that I think first responders miss is caffeine reduces the feeling of fatigue. It does not provide your body energy in the form of calories in and of itself, right? Like you have a Red Bull with sugar in it, like that's a different story. But it does not provide calories. It just reduces that feeling of fatigue that builds up over the course of the day. Okay. So when I have a firefighter who's just kind of a little groggy, not 4 calls, 5 calls after midnight, absolutely wrecked and trying to work out the next day, but just someone who's just like, I'm a little tired and I don't really want to work out. Sometimes what they need is a pre-workout carb because overnight, what from sleeping or calls or whatever, their glycogen stores are kind of getting a little low. So usually what that feels like is hitting a wall. The weights that usually feel light start to feel pretty heavy, or you're running and it feels like you're running through sludge. So if I add a carb before that workout, you now have a quick source of energy to actually push harder during your workouts. And I've seen a lot of people doing fasted workouts. And my understanding is that the fasted workouts are kind of a wash. If you like them, you feel good with them, do them. But a lot of people eventually, it doesn't work anymore. They don't feel as good. And they don't realize that if they had added a little bit of carb before, they would actually perform better during that workout. So the applesauce pouches are great because a lot of people will say, well, if I'm waking up at 3 a.m. to work out at 4, then my stomach is not handling much of anything. Applesauce doesn't, it's very light on your stomach. Very light. Other things like dry cereal works for me, like Cheerios, just picking at something. But usually those pouches are really good. Now with the pre-workouts, I know that's what your actual question was.
No, it's all good. I don't use them. And I don't know.
I know people listen. Yeah. We have some wild and crazy tech rescue stations in our area. So, pre-workout supplements, and we can kind of table this into spin into caffeine in a little bit, but caffeine, pre-workout supplements and energy drinks, I don't recommend. You're not going to find a health professional that recommends them and says they're healthy. Right. It's not true. And if the label says it's healthy or it's boosts your metabolism, it's a marketing tactic,
Right.
And caffeine is a thermogenic. It's going to naturally increase your metabolism marginally.
Right.
So it's kind of dumb in my opinion. It's redundant. But with the pre-workouts, the concern is the amount of caffeine that are in those supplements. So usually we want to keep it around 200 milligrams per sitting. I've seen things like, I don't know what it's called. It's like Gorilla Killer or something like that, where it's like 450 milligrams per scoop.
Jeez.
And when I was in college, Jacked was the big pre-workout supplement. I don't know if you've
3D.
ever... Yeah, the original formula. Formula. Yeah. Took out probably like half of the frat boy population at James Madison University with arrhythmias and other cardiac symptoms, right? Because what they would do is one scoop wouldn't work anymore after that party the night before, so they would double it up, triple scoop it, whatever. And I've seen firefighters do the same thing. So, it comes down, number one, you want to keep it to a single dose if you're going to do any of it. Period. Okay. Like, do not double scoop it. If you're building a tolerance, what you likely need to do is phase out of it and have a week that sucks. And then, try to reduce your tolerance that way. But I'm not going to pretend like that week is not going to be the worst week ever. So the other thing is typically with pre-workout supplements, if it says it has a proprietary blend, it's probably a red flag. If that proprietary blend does not tell you the quantity of ingredients, the amount of what each ingredient is, they're probably trying to pull the wool over your eyes. And what I mean by that is, so you're talking about beta-alanine with the face itchies. That is the ingredient that causes the face itchies or tingles. And a lot of pre-workout supplements will add that because people think it's working. I don't know if you remember, like Neutrogena had this face wash in the 90s that made your face tingle. Right?
Yeah.
And it was
I'm pretty sure I heard of it at least.
Yeah. It was mostly geared towards women, obviously, but like, it was like, you can really feel it cleaning your pores. Like, what? It's the same kind of thing. Yeah. It's the same kind of thing with beta-alanine, right? So beta-alanine is a muscle buffer. It's actually, it can be used for being able to push the intensity of your workout, that kind of burn that you feel, towards the end of like a high intensity set or like a sprint or something like that. It can push the burn further back so you can get more work done, which can lead to improved performance. And the thing is, you need 3 to 6 grams, I believe, of beta-alanine. And if they only add enough to make your face tingly, you're not getting the minimum effective dose to see the performance enhancing effects. So you want to have a pre-workout supplement if you're going to choose to use one that tells you the amount that's in that product. It should be third-party tested just to kind of increase the likelihood of it being safe. But really, I don't recommend those products. I'd rather people get it from like coffee or something like that, just because usually there's just a lot of, like, it's a big cocktail of ingredients that people just might not know what those effects have. And it might not even be in the dose that's needed to see performance enhancing benefits.
Okay. So when you say coffee, like now we're talking about just the coffee bean and then, general caffeine. And a lot of people are like, well, either it doesn't work for me or it keeps me up.
Okay.
Like some people
keeps you up in terms of like at night or something?
Yeah. Like, cause so we work out around 4.
Okay.
Right.
Yes. That's a tricky time.
Yeah. It's a tough time, 3 to 4 o'clock. But a lot of guys are like, well, I can't drink coffee after noon or else I won't sleep at all.
Yeah.
So how does somebody with that concern utilize coffee? And like you said, the applesauce, when do they take that? Like
sure.
When do we supplement with that food?
Yeah. So usually for food purposes, you're looking at if it's 15 to 30 minutes before, you want it to be as strictly carb as possible because fat, fiber, and protein will slow digestion. And slowing digestion means sometimes that means your tummy's a little bit bubble gutty and the gyms are typically small and we don't have time for that. So you want it to be strictly carbs. So that's what applesauce pouches or cereal will pretty much be but if you have 2 hours before, you can actually have a whole meal or something like that. with that, caffeine in general. So we're looking at trying to keep it under 400 milligrams of caffeine per day. So that's the FDA recommendation for healthy individuals. Keyword is healthy. But assuming that you're a healthy firefighter, like it would be really dumb of me to be like, you have to cut out caffeine entirely. Like,
right.
That would just be mean.
Yeah,
but
I like coffee.
Right. Well, also you work shift work. Like I go to bed and sleep every night. So imagine a civilian who sleeps every night and doesn't get woken up, coming into a station and, that runs 4 calls after midnight and saying no caffeine. Like I'm going to get set on fire for God's sake. But 400 milligrams is 30 to 40 ounces of coffee total in a day. So that's, in my opinion, for the most part, is pretty reasonable. You have some in the morning, you have some in the afternoon, and you're probably okay. But with caffeine in general, having it before bed, for a lot of people, it won't prevent them from falling asleep. Some people it will. But what it ends up doing is it messes with your sleep cycles. So you spend less time in rapid eye movement sleep and deep sleep. So then you wake up the next day feeling like garbage. So what do you reach for more of? Caffeine. Yep. Right. So you just have to keep in mind that there's like about a 5-hour half-life for caffeine. So before half of what you drank is in your system. So usually for most people, if bedtime is 9, the last caffeinated beverage is 4 p.m. at the absolute latest. But also understand that is the average rate for people to metabolize caffeine. Right. So for me, I know I'm a slower metabolizer. If I have any caffeine past 2 p.m., I'm going to be wired and not sleeping that night. So that sounds like there are some people on your shift who just maybe metabolize caffeine a little bit slower. So, any type of caffeine that they would do prior to that 4 o'clock workout might lead to detriments in sleep for them because they, again, are slower at metabolizing it.
Interesting. That makes a lot of sense. And now that I think about it, if you have multiple bouts of caffeine throughout the day, that half-life keeps getting pushed back. Is that correct?
Yeah. From my understanding, at least. Right. I mean, not the caffeine expert, but I get the understanding of it.
RescueRD, caffeine expert. No.
Right. Somebody has to do it, right? But really where firefighters tend to go wrong with this is not the coffee, it's the energy drinks.
Let's talk about that.
So, now we're looking at a market that has energy drinks of 300 milligrams of caffeine or more. So I said 400 was the general daily recommendation. Bang, Celsius Heat, I believe
Jimweed.
Ghost. Oh, I don't even know what that one is.
It's just one they put by the register. People grab it by the double.
They have all kinds of stuff by the register. So, all of those are typically over 300 milligrams. I've seen 200. Okay. There's a good amount that are 200 milligrams, which is right at that threshold of where I want people to be per sitting. Where I see people going
per
wrong.
Sitting, that's like a day.
Per sitting is in like one can.
Okay.
The reason I say per sitting is because I've seen firefighters either do like 2 energy drinks or like an energy drink and a coffee, an energy drink and a fat burner. Fat burners are a little sneaky. Because the reason they're fat burners or thermogenics in quotations is because they're jacked up on caffeine, like 200 milligrams per pill. You can actually lead to a caffeine overdose or cardiac symptoms if you have like an energy drink and a fat burner. Like it's pretty, but people don't think about it. Like they're like, oh, it's a thermogenic, it's burning my fat. And really the only effective thermogenics that you're going to find are illegal.
Most effective stuff is illegal.
Most of the good stuff is illegal. There are medications that can help with weight loss if needed. I have used them with my clients. I can't prescribe them. They have to go to a doctor, which means they have to get a primary care, and none of you guys have primary care, so that's a whole thing. But, the thermogen,
so
it's been a long 7 years. But the thermogenics are just garbage. But coming back to the energy drinks is the challenge, especially I tend to see this more in younger firefighters, is they start doing one energy drink to get through the day. Then it's not working in the afternoon, so they add one in the afternoon, and then that's not working before their workout, so they add a pre-workout supplement. And next thing you know, we're at 900 to 1,200 milligrams of caffeine per day.
Wow, that's a lot.
And they feel like crap. Like they just feel like garbage. And what ends up happening is typically when you're doing that much caffeine, it's starting to get later in the day. So then their sleep quality suffers significantly. So what happens is when I get those first responders who are at 9 to 1,200 milligrams a day, and I cut them back to even like 600, their sleep improves, their energy improves. They think I've done witchcraft. Right. So, and one of the tricks for that, and this, I've gotten to this horrible point in my career where I recommend Monsters and Red Bulls because they're half the caffeine of Bang and Celsius Heat and all of those things. You go from 300 to 140 milligrams of caffeine. So what that ends up doing is that person still has that routine of having the 3 energy drinks, right? They have their little like emotional support energy drink that they usually have, but I've cut their caffeine in half.
Gotcha.
It's a stepping stone for someone who's already really high. It is not a recommendation for someone who never drinks energy drinks to go to 3 Monsters a day.
Yeah,
that's not what I'm saying.
3.
Yeah.
600.
But it can really make a difference. And that's another thing with that's not a 9 to 5 recommendation, right? The typical would be cut out your energy drinks. What are you doing, dude? And it's like, do you run 15 calls a day? You know?
Right.
No, you don't. You work at a computer all day and get mad at emails. I mean, I can't recommend it, but.
Right. Yeah. It's not the same. It's
not
different, but wow. So that's really interesting that we could stay on the energy drink, but pick a different one, making a better choice. If we want better options, we have to make better choices.
Yeah. Our strength coach says better bad decision.
Oh, I like that. Make better bad decisions.
Better bad decisions. And that's kind of what firefighting is.
Considering, yeah.
Wow. So, typically I do actually recommend the sugar-free options, which gets people into all kinds of feelings.
I'm sure.
Artificial sweeteners in general, I just haven't seen enough evidence that they are truly going to cause damage long term.
The C word.
The cancers. Ready for this one. So the interesting thing with cancer and artificial sweeteners is there was a headline probably a couple months ago that said the World Health Organization classifies aspartame as a carcinogen. Did you happen to see that?
I haven't.
Okay. Well, at least in my world, it was a big headline. So
rightfully so.
Most of us know now that IARC recently classified firefighting as an occupation as a type 1 carcinogen.
I'm aware
which means
of that.
which means that it is known to cause cancer in humans. So type 1. Aspartame is a type 2B carcinogen, which means there's not enough evidence in animals or humans to support that aspartame causes cancer. There's a little bit of stuff, but it's not enough to say, hey, this causes cancer like firefighting does, like alcohol does. So we'll get to that. But the other thing here with cancer is the dose is what makes the poison, right? So the amount of aspartame that you would have to get per day, I believe it's 40 milligrams per kilogram, which is roughly 15 Diet Cokes a day for most people.
Holy cow.
There's always that one guy at the station who does the 15 Diet Cokes a day. But that's consistently every day,
He brushes his teeth 3 times a day.
Yeah. That's another story. But in general, like you'd have to get to a really high dose. And a lot of times with artificial sweeteners in general, like people aren't really overdoing it. Like they don't get to the dose that could even potentially cause issues or damage necessarily, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But then I have people arguing, or you see like these health coaches arguing that aspartame is going to cause all these issues, and they're not bringing up that alcohol is the type 1 carcinogen that is known to cause cancer in human in any amount. So, if you're really looking at trying to mitigate cancer from a dietary perspective, you need to be looking at how much alcohol you're doing and really limiting it as much as possible if your true goal is cancer prevention and reduction.
Can you say that again for the people in the back?
Yeah. You need to look at alcohol consumption if your goal is cancer reduction. And then the thing that you need to add is going to be the fruits and vegetables. You need to go to freaking town on fruits and vegetables, canned, fresh, frozen. You know, you need a really high antioxidant profile. And then obviously reducing your exposures on the fire ground as much as possible, wearing SPBA, making sure you clean your hood, cleaning your gear, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
You've got to reduce the exposures. And it's hard. But that's what you're dealing with. And the last thing I have to say with alcohol is you've got to look at your portions. So it's 2 drinks per day for men, 1 drink per day for women. And the serving size is where firefighters go wrong with alcohol. Okay. 12 ounces for beer is 1 serving. 5 ounces of wine is 1 serving. 1.5 ounces of 85 proof, I believe, liquor. So, you know, most firefighters I know, and my husband's not a firefighter, he's an IT guy. When he pours Deep Eddies into his Sprite, right? Like that's his thing. It's 2 shots worth of Deep Eddies. Okay. Like, and when I pour my wine glass of my special little sparkling rosé, because I am a basic person, that's 2.5 servings for my wine glass. You know what I mean? Because if it's half a bottle, which that's outing myself here. If it's half a bottle,
red wine and not drink the whole bottle.
No, right. Well, if I drink the whole bottle, like I am a lightweight, like that one glass is going to take me out. Yeah. 2 people. Wink.
Gotcha.
But, you know, a lot of us, I'm a dietitian and I overdo it, right? Because I don't, you know, when you're social, you're hanging out with people in the neighborhood or you're out at a nice restaurant, like you're overdoing it. And a lot of firefighters are like, well, I worked a 24-hour shift yesterday, so I can double up the next day. And it's like, okay, that's fine. But like, how many times are you doing that? How many times are you doubling up? Binge drinking, I believe, for men is 4 drinks in a sitting 5 times in a month. Okay. And a lot of times for the younger guys and girls are like, oh, no.
Oh, crap.
So it's something to think about, right? Because it's not just cancer prevention. It's cardiovascular disease prevention. It's brain health. It's fat loss. Yeah. I mean, if you're pounding a bunch of drinks a week, like, and also by the time I've had that glass of wine, now I want some popcorn or some other little snacky with it. So, you know, what are the food choices?
Right.
It can really kind of spiral from that standpoint. And then not to mention the mental health piece of it. You know, if you think you are starting to have some issues and your family's mentioning it, it's a conversation that no one really wants to have.
So that actually goes right into my next question. Like, how can we prioritize self-care and maintain that healthy relationship with food when we are under the weather, under that pressure, that mental strain is starting to show up, the emotional and physical strains of the job, but everything else that most humans deal with start to show up? How do we manage that with like our relationship with food anyways?
So it's super individualized because depending on the person, like some people who are really stressed don't eat at all. That's typically me. Other people who are really stressed just eat all the time, which is my husband, right? They graze on everything in sight, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. They're like a kind of eat their feelings kind of person. So it depends. The other thing that I have to mention is from a sleep standpoint, from a stress standpoint, 1 night of sleep deprivation can increase your hunger by 24% because there's a shift in hormones. So there's a decrease in hunger suppressing hormone leptin by 18%. And the hunger stimulating hormone ghrelin increases by 28%. And then it leads to choices that are saltier, sweeter, like fattier kind of choices the next day, which I'm sure like most of us have felt that.
Yeah.
So, you know, number 1 is when you're trying to eat better, you need to incorporate things that taste good, like that you like. And also, it's okay to have a little bit of sugar, a little bit of fat in there so you're interested enough to eat it. So I've worked with people who've come to me and they were doing the chicken, rice, and dry broccoli, you know, chicken, rice, whatever meals. Right. And I was like, well, why don't you just add some barbecue sauce to add it, keep it interesting? And they were like, what? like I can do that.
That's allowed?
Yeah, like what seasoning is allowed. Yeah. And that's part of the thing. Like when you track calories, sometimes it helps people because it gives them some guardrails, right?
Sure.
Where we have, all of us in our diets have room for what's called discretionary calories, which is what I like to call BS calories. Things that are like creamer and barbecue sauce and maybe a piece of candy after dinner, which I'm a big fan of, ice cream, like just calories that don't provide like nutrients, vitamins, minerals. They just provide calories.
Okay.
And a lot of us are exposed to cut out all sugar, cut out all sodium. If you have any of those things, saturated fat, whatever, you're going to die.
Right.
And I don't think that's fair. I don't do that in my life. You want to have a balance. But the challenge is when you're in a fat loss phase, you have a much smaller window for those discretionary calories. When you're in a gain phase, you have a lot of room.
Bulking season.
The bulking season is the best season, in my opinion. We liberalize the diet so you can get the calories in.
Gotcha.
But again, that 9 to 5 information is cut out all sugar, cut out all sodium, cut out all trans fats, and incorporating some of that can make your diet interesting enough to want to follow it.
Absolutely.
And then the other side too is like that stress eating piece.
Yeah.
So number one is depending on that person, and this comes from like my professional assessment of that person. Sure. If they're really in the hole, I need them to go to therapy first, like a behavioral health professional first.
Gotcha.
I've seen
first.
Yeah. I mean, nutrition impacts your mental health, but if you're in the hole from a mental health perspective, you're not going to eat very well.
Okay.
And if you're not sleeping very well, I see a lot of people who come to me sleeping less than 5 hours a night, and it's interrupted with huge sugar cravings.
Okay.
A lot of times, if I get their sleep in order, their sugar cravings kind of go away.
Yeah.
They don't go away entirely, but they kind of go away. So, and the reason I mention this is I actually recently had a 34-year-old come into my office, and he ate pretty well, but, busy medic, twins at home, 2 years old, 4-year-old kid. And he's like, my energy is horrible. And I'm like, it looks like you got a lot going on. It might just be your lifestyle. Like, I don't know if we can fix any of this when your diet looks like, and you're working out.
Yeah.
So I encouraged him to get a sleep study. And he was like, I don't really want to do this. Like, it's all this extra work. They ended up doing this sleep study virtually online. And then they did a home study had him pick up some like heart rate monitors and stuff. Yeah. Major obstructive sleep apnea. He gets on a CPAP. His life is completely changed. His sleep is 1,000,000 times better. His sugar cravings have gone down exponentially. And he feels amazing. 34 years old.
Yeah. That's amazing.
That's young. It's young. In a reasonably weighted person. And the reason I mentioned that is there was a study of 7,000 firefighters that found that 37% of them had a sleep disorder, and 80% of them did not know it. 80%. So,
I guess if you're asleep to it.
Yeah. Well, but the thing is
unintended.
You guys, this usually happens around 7 to 15 years into the career.
Okay.
Like now you're not you're not a bachelor or bachelorette coming out of the academy. You've got kids, you've got
kids, mortgage, wife,
promotional exams,
partner,
overtime,
Yep.
Medic school, all these other things. And your sleep is starting to suffer, and that sleep deprivation is starting to wear on people at that point in their career. But they're so used to being miserable that they don't know there's another alternative. And sleep studies, traditionally people have thought, oh, I'm just going straight into the lab and they're going to watch me sleep in a lab.
Right.
And since COVID, the way I've seen it, at least in the Fairfax area, is now the first session is virtual. It's half-hour virtual, which is a huge barrier reducer to begin with. Yeah. And then the sleep study is either a virtual one where you pick up the equipment, you do it at home, or it is a in-person one. So if you hit a lot of risk factors, they're going to want you to do it in person. But it's not like this cold, scary lab. Like they actually set it up as this nice bedroom and have you sleep. But a lot of times it's picking up those sleep disorders that can then be fixed with either like a mouth guard or CPAP or other things that can significantly make an improvement. And then you're working out more because you're not miserable and your sugar cravings have gone down. You're less cranky with your spouse and your kids. Like that sleep study can be life-changing. So absolutely. I highly encourage people to do that if they haven't been feeling good.
You guys heard it first. Go get your sleep checked, especially if you're not feeling 100%. Mm-hmm. Wow. I guess I didn't realize that so many people were exposed to these sleep disturbances. Yep. And almost all of them didn't know.
Yeah, 80%.
80%. That's a lot.
Like over a third of firefighters in that very large study. Like that That's insane. And it does impact your dietary choices, period. We all know that when we're tired, we don't make good decisions from a food standpoint. So it makes it easier to see those changes. You know, the last thing on the stress eating piece is, okay, maybe you got your sleep in order or you're working on it. What do you do if you're having trouble with it? If you're having uncontrolled binges, like you black out and you eat everything in sight and then you're miserable, that could be a sign of it, like you're on that disordered eating spectrum, which no one wants to hear it. But again, sometimes exposure to that level of trauma can lead to things like that. Again, I'm not the best like disordered eating dietitian. There are some who specialize. There's actually an additional credential you can get as a dietitian. But there's also therapists who can work with you on that. But if it's just kind of like you're overeating, like I used to do it all the time and I've gotten better at it. One is figuring out better coping mechanisms, which like yoga and stretching and sleeping and breathing, and those work until they don't. In my experience, you know, there's just one thing that just sets you over the edge. Is having, again, better bad decisions to eat. So my favorite things, white cheddar popcorn, like the Smart Pop, the Skinny Pop. Popcorn is a whole grain. You'll get a little fiber, and usually they taste pretty good, and they're crunchy and fun.
Yeah. How about rice cakes?
Rice cakes are good if you like them. Yes. Perfectly fine. Yeah, I like the caramel ones. Those are good.
Yes. There's other kinds?
There's like cheddar ones and stuff. Those are pretty good too. But if I'm going to do cheddar, there's Lay's Poppables. I don't know if you've ever heard of those.
Yeah, they're the small ones. Yeah,
they look like a waffle.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain. Lay's Poppables, Popcorners. Okay. Popcorners actually now has like a protein one. I forget what they're called. But they have like a protein crisp. And I took them to the station and the firefighters inhaled them, which I guess I can't tell if that's good or bad because they pretty much would do that with anything. But
right. If you put it on the counter.
Yeah. Well, I kind of like threw it at them and it just, it's usually how it goes. Those are good. In terms of, I'm a big ice cream kind of person. Okay. So Yasso yogurt bars, Yasso.
Okay.
They are like an ice cream bar. They're 6 grams of protein, like 90 calories. And they're the closest thing that I've found that tastes like ice cream. It's just when you hear Greek yogurt bar, it's like, ugh.
Right.
But they're really good. And if you go on a bender and eat 4, which I don't know from experience, it's under 400 calories and it tastes good. Unlike the Halo Top, which tastes horrible and like sadness. So, you know.
Yeah. Anyway. And those are Yasso.
In the freezer section.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And they have a bunch of different flavors, like chocolate peanut butter, which is usually the one, salted caramel, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
You just have to hide them from your children because once they find them, you're never going to get them.
Oh.
Yeah.
Dang it.
So they're really good. But yeah, so finding better bad decisions of things that you actually like or alternatives to the thing you would go for. I'm going to be honest though, cookies and cake, like there's just nothing that fixes that. Like you need sugar and fat for the textural component. Sure. So I just haven't found anything yet that's like really comparable.
Yeah, I had 2 donuts yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine.
Yeah, fine.
And it's okay. Yeah, exactly. You stopped. So it's where people are feeling like they're losing this control, I guess, which was me when I was bodybuilding. So that's how I ended up spiraling was I would like go over my calories, like freak out, and then just go on this binge and then purge. Sure. And some firefighters in my experience, they don't do the purging part,
right?
Whether through exercise or other means. And, you know, that freaks people out when I talk about it, but I just feel like these are things that a lot of people just don't talk about. They kind of like I hid it from my husband. I hid it from everyone. And because I'm a health professional, I should know better, right?
Right. You should be perfect.
I should be perfect, but I was in a stressful internship. I didn't feel like I had any control. I was in a significant calorie deficit, so my brain was completely out of whack. And I feel like that while it's not even on the level of a lot of firefighters, that's sometimes where they end up. And that is where either therapy, which is what I should have done at the time, but I was on serious time constraints and I couldn't get to an in-person therapy. So I did a lot of podcasts and breathing and working on my relationship with food. But the thing that a lot of people don't realize is when you're working on your relationship with food, you can't count calories. And you probably can't really be in a fat loss phase until you have a better relationship with food. because otherwise you're just going to be yo-yoing and yo-yoing and yo-yoing. And that's really hard for people to hear when they maybe need to lose more fat, but their brain is just not where it needs to be.
That's interesting. Mm-hmm. And how are you doing with all that?
Oh yeah. I mean, I fixed it in like a year. Like it was just yeah, like the internship for me was really hard because I had no control. I wasn't getting paid. I didn't like my rotations, and I was in a severe calorie deficit. And bodybuilding is not a healthy place. Like you can't pretend bodybuilding is a healthy sport. It's just not.
Oh, it screwed me up. It really changed it influenced my perspective on what I thought was healthy. And I've since reduced my amount of bodybuilding training, but it still haunts me to this day.
Oh, it always does.
Like, body composition doesn't always influence fitness. They're relative, but like bodybuilding, that has no real place in my perspective in being a high performing firefighter.
Well, no, I mean the ones who have the veins in their abs are typically the ones who suck at throwing ladders the most, from what I hear. Right.
Yeah.
When you're in a significant calorie deficit, you're going to see significant detriments in performance.
Yeah.
And that's the nature of the beast. So a lot of times, especially for recruits, if I've got a recruit who's like under 12% body fat during EMS, I need them to gain weight. Because if they lose any more weight, I'm going to be very worried about their ability to perform on the fire ground or during fire training.
Yeah. And you mentioned fasting earlier, and we had several years ago, we had a lieutenant who was going into this keto type stuff and influenced a couple of younger fellows to, jump on board. And we had one guy bonk at a fire, likely because of his fueling prior to that scenario. So it's definitely a real thing. And, there's all sorts of fad diets out there. We just got to be careful.
Well, and I hate to say it, but sometimes the firefighters who are most into wellness can be some of the most dangerous to other firefighters.
Sure.
Because what you don't understand when you are super hyped on health and fitness for yourself and you're super into the fads, you can end up hurting someone because you are only recommending that diet because it worked for you.
Right.
And a dietitian or other health professional are making recommendations based on the assessment of who they have sitting in front of them.
That makes sense.
And that's hard to hear. And I screwed it up as a new professional as well. Like when I came out of bodybuilding as a new dietitian, I was pushing paleo on everyone because I somehow got sucked up into that world somehow.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't in a good place mentally for a year or two. And then so that's just the thing. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I really love health, I want people to change, you have to understand for firefighters, if you ask them to do something extreme because your expectation is that the profession is extreme, you have to understand they're starting at a much lower level than even the general population. Sure. So if I have someone trying to go to keto or vegan or vegetarian or intermittent fast 1 meal a day, you're asking them to get to a second-story window without a ladder. There's no stepwise rung progression to get them to where they need to be. So they go black or white and they fall off and burn out immediately.
Yeah, that kind of escapes the whole 1% better every day to just be a expert tomorrow.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a lot.
And nutrition is a lot of listening, and that is hard for an ADHD person, I'm in the boat too. But, until you've practiced with hundreds of thousands of clients and, you can't just keep pushing the one diet that works for you right now in your phase of life to someone who's in a different phase of life, who's a different person than you, who has different financial means, social means, other capabilities. It's just, it's hard, but it's hard because you're so excited about it yourself.
Absolutely. And you just want everybody to be well. And I totally get it, but you're absolutely right. There's some steps to take, and sometimes the best recommendation is talk to somebody who knows more than you.
Yes, but the minimum stuff that most firefighters can recommend to other firefighters is getting more fruits and vegetables, getting a protein at every meal, drinking enough water, hydrating appropriately.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I have some good tangents on that. So my biggest thing on the hot topic for hydration right now is the oral rehydration solutions that are on the market. So I see a lot of firefighters going for sugar-free hydration products, and my concern is those are from the research that I have seen right now, those are not the optimal products, the sugar-free products. And let me explain why. So an oral rehydration solution, an ORS product, something like Drip Drop or Liquid IV are some really popular ones. Yeah. They were developed for the cholera epidemic, where they didn't have access to IV therapy in the quantity that was needed. So they developed a product that was more portable and comparable to IV therapy for mild to moderate dehydration. So these products have double the sodium and half the sugar of sports drink. And they are about, I believe, 30% more effective than sports drink. If I'm 20 or 30% more effective than sports drink.
Okay.
But the big thing with that is that sugar and sodium are performance enhancing in high intensity environments. They are not good for longevity in low performing environments. 9 to 5, sitting around the day room, watching football.
Right.
So sugar, number one, well, actually, let's start with sodium. So sodium helps pull water across the cell membrane to rehydrate the cell. Okay. It also replaces the significant sodium losses that happen on the fire ground of about 400 to 1,800 milligrams in a liter of sweat, which y'all lose in about 30 minutes.
Okay, good.
So you lose 400 to 1,800 milligrams of sodium potentially in 30 minutes on the fire ground. Wow. You got to replace that, and the sodium will help rehydrate you faster to get that liquid into the cell. There is another transporter on that cell, the sodium glucose co-transporter, that if you have glucose available, it will open that transporter. Glucose pulls sodium across the cell membrane. What follows it? Water. So products with a little bit of sugar will rehydrate you 2 to 3 times as fast as a product that's sugar-free.
Interesting.
And that's really tricky because there are a lot of Element's a really popular one that's floating around right now. Yeah. It doesn't mean it's bad for you. It's going to replace the sodium. It's going to get you to drink the water. But is it as optimal as a product that can use an additional transporter?
Okay, that makes sense because we've pulled in a handful of different, these solutions, and we've tried them. A lot of guys are like, "Well, I want one without sugar." Okay, well we got the Element one, and that one was a big hit. But it started with the Liquid IV. That was pretty good too. And my thought personally was, well, I don't mind the 2 grams or 3 grams of sugar because I'm choosing not to drink cola I'm trying to make better bad decisions because I know I have sugar in my hydration packet, right? So maybe choosing something with sugar for that specific instance isn't all that bad is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's performance enhancing. And that's the challenge. So when you talk to a sports dietitian, they're going to be pushing more sodium and sugar because they're working with populations that are doing high intensity work, physical work. And that is a little bit of the opposite of what we tell a 9 to 5 Gen Pop. You go on light duty because you're injured. You're in an admin position now. You're a battalion chief in a buggy. These things change. You probably don't need those products as much. Sure. But the other side of sugar too is, remember how earlier I mentioned that fat, protein, and fiber slow digestion? Yeah. On the fire ground, you don't have the luxury of waiting to digest. You're in a sympathetic state. Your digestion is slowed on purpose to be able to do what you need to do. Right. But if you start to bonk, if you've ever done, I'm assuming you've done several hours of overhaul or something like that before where you're just gassed at the end.
I've experienced the bonk.
Where you're like ready to drop, but you don't have the option. Right. Yeah, you're done. If you had some sugar earlier on, or even right then, it's going to prolong high intensity performance because it's going to get into your system within 15 to 20 minutes to be utilized for fuel. If I give you a bowl of quinoa, it's going to take longer because that protein and fiber is going to take longer for you to digest it. Therefore, it takes longer to get to your muscles. Gotcha. So again, that sugar piece is not only important for that hydration factor, but also to be able to continue high intensity performance when you need it the most. Yeah. So it's just hard because firefighters want that black or white answer of you do sugar or you don't. But it's you do sugar when the situation is appropriate.
That makes a lot of sense.
So a lot of times what I get questions, I don't know, do you guys have canteens? Like the volunteers bring you snacks?
No? Oh, yeah. So if we're on a multiple alarm fire or where you have a significant weather event where we're stuck somewhere and it's cold, we will get resources will come to the scene, and we'll get warming buses, and like
Sure.
Heart
Okay.
will bring us some food and Rice
Snacks and
Krispies
stuff.
and burgers.
Yeah. So apparently Cal Fire does not have canteens or anything like that, and I sounded like a complete idiot this week. But in our area we call them canteens, and they're always like, hey, how can we make the canteen healthier for the firefighters? In my opinion, that's a misnomer, right? Because what I'm going to put on that canteen, actually, Rice Krispie Treats isn't even the worst option, right?
Right.
It's going to be quick sources of sugar with sodium and fluids, because that's what you need during the alarm. After we add the protein for recovery, but during you really don't want it because it's just going to give you bubble gut and it's going to be a bad time.
Right.
So calling it a healthier canteen is kind of a misnomer. They also wanted me to get rid of like the Snickers and stuff like that, which I don't hate. But if I was going to replace a candy on a canteen, because usually the volunteers are like, if we get rid of the candy, they're going to set us on fire. And I'm like, you're probably right. Yeah. And you're going to push me right under the bus too and be like,
Exactly.
The dietitian said. So if I was going to keep candy on a canteen, I would switch it over to Swedish Fish, Skittles, Starburst, like something that is like a straight sugar. I don't know if you saw like Marshawn Lynch got sponsored by Skittles because he was eating Skittles on the sideline.
I didn't see that. No.
Yeah, that was like a thing. I would say like 2 or 3 years ago.
That's funny.
And from a sports dietitian standpoint, he's replacing the sugar that he's going to need to push hard. It'll actually help him push during that high intensity event. The only downside of that is just doing candy means that you're not getting electrolytes and you're not getting fluid.
Okay.
So it's not a perfect, but like, again, like if there was going to be a time to do it.
Right.
Does this make sense?
Yeah. So here
It's kind of confusing.
No, that makes perfect sense to me, and hopefully the people listening. After you said alcohol is bad, I think we lost 95% of everybody.
Probably. I mean,
so
it's kind of obvious though. I mean,
I know. But if you're still here listening, I think it makes perfect sense. And here's what our take was for my crew. So we like to go pretty intense, maybe not heavy, but we like to work out pretty hard in our sessions. And sometimes the alarm will go like you're 3/4 of the way through, and you're like, you were pushing kind of hard, which is a risk in and of itself, but we don't mind because that's the nature of the job. And if we have an agreement, if that happens, one of us runs to the fridge and grabs a Coke, and we split the Coke between the two of us.
all right. I mean, it's not the worst thing.
I mean, if we're jumping in the truck to go put out a fire and we know there's multiple calls and it's not, and sometimes it is just a cancel, but so what?
You're coming back to the workout anyway.
Thought process.
Yeah.
I mean, is that the same idea?
The thing I would probably do is more of like an applesauce pouch if you were trying to improve the quality of your food.
Okay. No, yeah, that makes perfect sense.
If you wanted to. Because you can keep those on the rig pretty easily, you know. They don't have to be refrigerated. They're not like, I actually half the time don't even do them refrigerated. They're perfectly fine, not as long as they're not hot, like boiling.
Yeah.
So, in my ideal fairy tale land, like if you knew you were you're going on the way to like a box or something like that, you would probably be at least mixing up your liquid IV, your drip drop, or one of those products into a water bottle and trying to get that down as soon as you can.
We do that.
Okay, you good. Because I've been told 100 times, they're like, that's not realistic. And I'm like,
that is so realistic.
Just like work with me here. Like, okay, like as best as you can, right? Because so people will report like, the best way I can explain it is after that kind of high intensity stuff, you're usually like hungover almost, like you feel like sluggish and brain fog and your head hurts and like you can't drink enough water to save your life, you know? So if you get one of those products in earlier on, whether that's you're already there, it's a confirmed fire, or you're going, the earlier you can get that in, the better you will feel later on, because you're kind of replacing as you lose, rather than, we know that 9 out of 10 firefighters show up to a planned drill dehydrated. And those firefighters lost an additional 3 pounds of fluid per bottle, a 15-minute bottle.
That's crazy.
So being and showing up hydrated is actually protective against further dehydration.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
I mean, that just goes into mindset for me. Like, how can you show up to a planned drill dehydrated? Like, what in the heck?
My thought is they were all at the same hotel and maybe went to the bar, is in my experience.
Sure. Totally. I totally get it. That makes a lot of sense.
But also think about it, like our stokers. I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming your academy has like stokers or something, like where they, if we have a wood burning fire or something like that, wood burning drill, they're in the, like basically in the oven. Yeah, they're in the oven all day.
For sure.
And my stokers are the ones I'm most concerned about on those days, because they come in after a 24, 48-hour shift on energy drinks and prayer and then wonder why they feel like crap later. So that for them, it's going to probably and I actually have a protocol for drip drop or liquid IV that Fernando Montes is an exercise physiologist for LA Fire. And he did studies with urine specific gravity on all of his recruits for like the past several years.
Oh, wow.
And it shows you based off the color of your pee, how many you need to do prior to stoking or a planned drill or burn.
Right. So we have instructors. I'm on my instructor cadre at my department.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
And just, I think last year, 2 years ago, at some point, we ran a burn session. So I think it was just a training for the instructors, and maybe it was a crew development day, but one of our instructors went through one session and came out and had an emergency heat event in the back of his truck. And it was like, holy smokes. We've been planning this for weeks.
Right, but the problem is you get tired, you get busy, something comes up.
Totally.
Especially if you're an officer, when you're leaving that station, something's going to pop off, you're just not thinking. So from my standpoint is for instructors, you are going to probably significantly reduce your chance of liability to have liquid IV or drip drop available during those high intensity burns, because people are going to be more likely to use it if it's available to them.
Right on. Perfect. Yeah, we're trying to get it into each firehouse right now. So just so
we did that in Fairfax.
How'd it go?
So I wanted to use drip drop, which, like, full disclaimer, like, they have had me present for them before, but I'm not sponsored because I'm not smart enough to figure out how to do sponsorships. But it's sweeter. Like, I personally prefer a sweet, like, I'm not, like, liquid IV is a little too salty for me. But when we had to do a 3-cost comparison, to buy a product for the academy, drip drop or liquid IV came in, it was $4,000 cheaper for the same amount of product. Okay. So there is a wholesale liquid IV site, which is why it came in that much cheaper. You just have to buy it from the wholesale site, not the plain site. Right. But we sent it out to stations, and I sent out a letter, and I swear the letter was like in pictures, and it was like liquid IV, fire, bad, sitting around the day room. And where do you think they drank it?
Oh, day room.
Yeah,
for sure.
So now what we've done is we put it on our safety officer buggies.
Okay.
Because then they can kind of distribute it as needed for higher intensity things. I still don't think it was a bad idea, because that meant pretty much everybody in our county was able to try the product and see how they felt on it, which I think increases the likelihood of them purchasing it. But for recruits specifically, a lot of times just their mental capacity is super limited. Yeah. It's a stressful environment. Plus, a lot of them, like, financially aren't doing that great. Or their priority is not on food and hydration products. So having that provided to them, at least for the larger burns, is likely going to reduce your risk of hydration related issues for not only your instructors, but for your recruits.
Perfect. So I'd like to really get all of, I'm going to make sure I put all your links into this show, because you have so much valuable information to share. And I'm going to make sure everybody that comes across this podcast has it. One last thing before we wrap up, well, maybe two, but could you recommend any useful resources as far as books or, stuff that you offer, and kind of tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, for what I need to write a book.
Yes,
I have tons of recipes, because I've been writing for Palm Beach Gardens Fire for like 2 years now. I just need to have another brain. But I do have a free recipe book on my website. It's a station dinner recipe book. And in our area, that's $5 to $6 a head for shifts of 6, 10, and 14, half a pound of protein per person. The math is done. If it's a Pinterest family of 4, that's 2 firefighters. So the intention is, again, assuming that if you needed a larger portion because it was high intensity, or you needed leftovers for the next shift, there should be enough. And that's things like Cajun chicken pasta, tacos, barbecue chicken bowls. Those are some of the more popular recipes.
Yeah.
So that you just have to join my email list, which I don't even have an email. I've been collecting emails and not sending emails. So maybe one day I'll be good at business.
But sounds like you need an assistant.
I need an I mean, I work full time and I have a business and I teach at university. So it's like, whatever. So there's that. And then I also, any posters that I make for Fairfax, including the hydration ones, we have a weigh in, weigh out protocol for our recruits. Those are all free on my website. So I recommend putting the hydration poster on all of the urinals in your academy and bathrooms, because it literally shows the color of the pee and how much of the hydration product you need. So those are kind of my stuff. And then of course, social media, I do at least, I'm switching over to carousels for the infographics. So I post 6 times a week on Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah.
But
where can
with
we
that,
find you on Instagram?
Oh, Instagram and TikTok are both at RescueRD.
Awesome.
So, and all of that's firefighter nutrition specific information.
Good stuff.
Like most of the stuff, it's kind of hard because like people are like, okay, where are you learning all your stuff from? I just look at the research papers, general population stuff, and then I look at what the firefighters are doing and then try and tailor it as best I can to that. So that's kind of just how my brain works. It's like the hyper focus part of the ADHD, right?
Perfect.
But, you know, I think another good resource, my friend Annette Zapp at Fire Rescue Wellness is wonderful. She also has a podcast, and I think hers is interesting because she brings like the researchers from the regular world and then has them come in and talk about how it applies to firefighting.
Nice.
So, which
That's
I think
rescue.wellness?
Fire Rescue Wellness.
Fire Rescue Wellness. Okay. I'm very familiar of her work. I just forgot what the
Yeah. She's the best. And she does a lot of carousels on like if she sees a research paper and she summarizes it for you, which I really
awesome.
You need help with. Yeah, exactly. Even me, I'm like, my brain is a marshmallow after dealing with firefighters all day, honestly. In terms of books, I don't read unless it's murder because that's all I'm in the mood for after working.
Nice.
But like Precision Nutrition, you know, I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yep.
They have, I mean, the reason I like their stuff is it's, okay, you're tired. Here's what you do. Okay, you feel like crap. Here's what you do. Okay, your life is on fire. Here's what you do. And while it's not for firefighters, I think it's a realistic approach as well.
Yeah, I like their stuff. They do really good stuff. So.
And then the last one there's another one. Have you heard of examine.com?
No.
Okay, that's a big one because I get a lot of those supplement questions, right? Like, what's this supplement? And like a lot of times I'm like, what are you talking? What is this new one? I don't know that one. So examine.com is a bunch of researchers who got together, and instead of being funded by the industry, they basically fund themselves with their own membership. So I pay for the membership. It's I think like $120 a year. For a professional, it makes sense. For a not professional, probably not so much. But they have basically, if you go on there and you want to know about curcumin, turmeric, or something like that, you can see the quantity, the summary of what you would need, what it's usually used for. And then if you scroll down, you can see all of the studies and the study summaries and the grade of evidence. So A, B, C, D. And then you can scroll even further down if you want to learn the mechanism of action, you know, like and all the nerdy stuff. So it's pretty relatively easy to understand Gen Pop at the top. And then as you go further down, it gets a little bit more nerdy. But they have a lot, like when you're looking at a supplement, you know, the Jacked guy on TikTok is talking about this and you want to see if it's worth your time or worth your money. That would be where I would go first.
Perfect. Well, thank you. And then my last question for you is something I have all of my guests do is what would be your priority traffic? So you're familiar with the fire service and radio communications, right? Like anything that's urgent that needs to go over the airwaves, somebody will say priority traffic, and then they have precedence. So what would be your priority traffic for firefighters regarding nutrition?
Yeah. So again, that priority, if I was going to simplify it entirely, protein in a plant. Get a protein in a plant at each meal and snack. You're doing better than 90% of the population.
Awesome.
So,
well, Megan, I really appreciate your time. If there's anything that I missed, feel free we can put it in right now. This has been a very enlightening conversation, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think those are most of our hot topics. Otherwise, we're just going to squirrel off into Narnia from a nutrition perspective. So,
right on. Can you just give everybody a rundown real quick of all of your social media handles so they can get a hold of you and If you don't mind, I'd like to put up the hydration stuff in my fire department. Would that be something?
Yeah,
that we
put it
can
up,
do?
please. Like I
Okay,
said,
cool.
any of those posters, you're welcome to repost. A lot of people will take screenshots of the infographics on my Instagram and put them up on like a bulletin board or something.
Yeah, awesome.
But in any case, at rescue.rd, Instagram, Facebook, also TikTok and LinkedIn, if you're on those kind of places.
Yeah.
And then my website, there's the free recipe book, www.rescuerd.com.
Awesome. Well, Megan, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you on. And for everybody listening, go check out Megan at all of her social media handles and platforms and give her a follow, a like, subscribe, and print off and share all of her fabulous information. So on behalf of everybody in the show, thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
As all great things do, this episode of Priority Traffic Podcast has come to an end. And from the bottom of my heart, I'd like to express my gratitude for your time and attention. Your support and feedback help the show to continually improve our content and to bring you the best possible experience. If you found value in today's discussion and it has challenged your current practices, we encourage you to share this episode with your colleagues and friends. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow Priority Traffic Podcast on our various channels to stay up to date with our latest of shows. At Priority Traffic, we strongly believe that prioritizing wellness is the foundation of long-term high performance. By taking care of ourselves both physically and mentally, we can unlock our full potential and achieve greatness. We are honored to be a part of your journey towards self-mastery and grateful for you being here with us today. Remember, together we can prioritize wellness and realize the performance we deserve. Thank you for listening to Priority Traffic Podcast, and until next time, stay safe and stay committed to your well-being.